Ever felt like an imposter in your own success story? Vince Warnock gets real about overcoming imposter syndrome and how AI is transforming writing, publishing, and business. From smashing writer's block to leveling the playing field for neurodivergent creators, this conversation is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Welcome to Rise to Lead, the podcast where heart-driven leaders come together to inspire and innovate. They will share actionable tips and insights that help you lead your team more successfully, advance your career or business as a leader, achieve greater impact, and experience deeper fulfillment. I'm your host, Regina Huber, guiding you through deep conversations about leadership that's rooted in service, freedom, and the desire to leave a positive mark on the world. Are you ready to create real change in your leadership, your career, your life? Join me for a complimentary Lead and Thrive session, a 60-minute one-on-one strategy session where we will discuss your specific needs and map out the next steps to lead yourself and others powerfully. Spots are limited, so don't wait. Visit transformyourperformance.com/Lead Thrive session to book your Lead and Thrive session today. Let's work together to make it happen. It's showtime. Welcome to this episode of Rise to Lead with a repeat guest. I just had to bring him back on. Vince Warnock from Australia, originally from New Zealand, who is also the host of his own top-ranked podcast, Chasing the Insights. I am so glad, Vince, that you could find the time again to join us here. Welcome.
Honestly, Regina, the moment you said, "Can I come back on the show?" I'm like, you can have me anytime on here. Seriously, I thoroughly enjoyed the last time. You got an amazing podcast, and I know you got an awesome audience as well.
Thank you so much. Yes, they are awesome indeed. And I am so glad we could find the time because we do have a big time difference. So, yes. And for those of you who missed our previous episode together, here's a quick summary of Vince's awesomeness. It's episode 13, by the way, for anyone who wants to catch up. Vince Warnock is a 10 times best-selling author, and I bought his latest book, Irresistible Emails, which is about neuromarketing. And we discussed this topic last time, actually, in that episode. Again, it's episode 13. Vince is a publisher and award-winning marketing and visibility coach. He is known for his expertise in neuromarketing, publishing, and AI, and has been presented with numerous awards, including the Fearless 50, a program designed by Adobe to recognize the world's top 50 marketers. Not bad at all. Vince is also the host of the globally top 1.5% ranked podcast, Chasing the Insights, and the founder of ATG Publishing and the Sisterhood of AI. Vince, in our first conversation for this podcast, you shared quite a bit about yourself and what brought you to where you are today. Again, that was episode 13. Let's talk about imposter syndrome. Let's start out like that. And I know we have always amazing topics to talk about because you're an expert in so many things. So it's a tough choice. But let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example of imposter syndrome. Literally,
Yeah.
when you were reading out that bio, a little part of me wanted to go, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, Regina, I'm now 11 times best-selling author because my new book went bestseller." And then I was going to say, "Oh, and don't forget, we've launched a magazine, and don't forget," and then I went, "Wow, I couldn't bring myself to do that because a little part of me is going, who do you think you are? Like, what makes you think you're so special? Keep your mouth shut." And I think that's something that I know most of you probably listening to this and watching this, and certainly myself have dealt with this through most of my life. And I always remember, like, honestly, I still remember one time when I was a young entrepreneur. So I wanted to be an entrepreneur rather. So I was working in a kind of day-to-day job, and I was trying to build a side business and everything. And I won tickets to a business breakfast And this was amazing. And funny enough, full circle, it was actually Adobe that was running the business breakfast. And I won these tickets, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to go to this thing. Now, first of all, I was a broke, like just out of study. One of my first jobs. So I was broke. I had no money, no food, no nothing. I was starving. And I was thinking, I'm going to a breakfast. I'm going to eat all the food. I'm going to drink all the coffee, and I'm going to absorb everything I can from this thing. So I thought to myself, what's it going to be like there? And I pictured all these people in suits, and funny enough, that's exactly what it was like. It was all these business people there, and they're all dressed in, now in my mind, they're all dressed in Armani. They're all dressed in like, they're all dressed in Tom Ford suits and things. Like everyone just looked immaculate to me. But that's because I didn't own a suit. So I had to go down to a Goodwill shop, and I picked up a $10 suit, which is about all I could afford. And it was the ugliest thing you've ever seen, Regina. Like, honestly, it was this shiny, kind of almost metallic gray. It was a horrible, very 80s kind of suit. Shiny kind of one, double-breasted, wrong size as well. Like the sleeves went right down to my fingertips and everything. I had long hair. I actually had hair back then, which is a miracle. I had long hair and a long goatee. So I tied my hair up in a ponytail. And I turned up to this thing just looking completely out of place. So to me, everybody there looked like they're in Armani. Now, I got in there and I felt like a complete outsider. I went up, I had an allocated table, I got my food, I got my coffee, started talking to people around the room, and they really, they felt like they were talking down their nose to me. Like it felt like everyone there was ignoring me. That could be my own perception from my own insecurities, but certainly that's what it felt like. But anyway, we were there, and this speaker was amazing. And he talked about his life, his job, he talked about his career, what he had done, he talked about how to kind of make it. I was taking pages of notes. I absorbed everything from him. And then at the very end, he said, right, I'm going to come around. He said, that's it for me. I'm going to come around every table. If you've got any questions, ask it, and I'll do my best to answer them. And I watched him. He's going around the room, and he's at the table just before ours. And I'm like, okay, this is it. This is it, Regina. This is my chance. I'm gonna ask him something intelligent that's gonna floor everybody. They're all gonna go, wow, this guy's bright. But while I'm trying to think of what that bright question is, he literally walks over and says, oh, any questions? And the only thing that came out of my squeaky voice at the time was, at what point in your career did you know you'd made it? And everyone at my table just kind of sort of derisive laugh. They're all like, oh, what a stupid question kind of thing. And I literally on the inside wanted to scream. I wanted to curl up in a ball and cry, run out of the room. I don't know what I wanted to do. I felt really upset with myself. My brain just literally went, dude, you have one job. Just ask a decent question. That's all you had to do. So I felt really out of place. But the speaker was amazing. He turned around, he goes, oh, now that's actually a good question. And everyone kind of went, oh, like at the table. And I went, oh, I was probably more surprised than all of them. And he said, I'm going to let you in on a little secret, Vince. And I went, okay, because I have my name tag on. And I'm like, a secret from somebody of this caliber. I'm going to write down every freaking word this guy says. So he says, every morning, Vince, I have a morning routine. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is something I've heard of before. Like, every good entrepreneur has a morning routine. Okay, what is it? And he goes, well, every morning I deliberately get up early. So I'm writing down deliberately early. Nice. And he says, I go straight to the bathroom. And I'm like, interesting. Didn't check his emails. I'm thinking about all the different things. So I went straight to the bathroom. And he goes, I fill the sink with cold water. And I'm thinking, do I ask him how cold the water? No, I'll just write down cold water. And he goes, I splash that water over my face. I look myself in the mirror and I go, ha, today's the day they find out you're a fraud. And I just went, what? And the whole table kind of went silent. And he goes, I've never felt like I made it, Vince. I always feel like an outsider. I always feel like a fraud. And then he kind of indicated around the table I was sitting at. He did something really powerful. He indicated around the table. He said, most of us here do. And at that moment, he did two things. First of all, he made me aware of imposter syndrome, what it is. I didn't have a name for it then. I don't think they even had a name for it back then. But he made me aware that the fact that I'm not alone in this, and someone of his level of success feels the same way that I do. So it kind of became almost like a great equalizer. And then I looked around the table and everyone was kind of nodding. And I'm like, hey, wait a minute. These people are all the same as me. I'm not an outsider. I may look different. I may have a cheap suit. I may have a terrible suit and terrible hair at the time. But I belong here as much as everybody else. And that was the second thing that happened, is made me realize I have as much right to be here as anyone else. So that was my first kind of big eye-opener for imposter syndrome. And since that moment, over the many, many, many years, I have kind of looked into it more and more. It obviously didn't rid me of imposter syndrome, but it certainly opened my eyes to what it is and understanding how it works in our brain as well.
Yeah, that's a great story. Wow. And I was, I was curious. It was you told it very in a very intriguing way. So I sort of thought that the speaker would have an amazing reaction. But this was really,
Yeah,
really, really cool.
yeah.
Congratulations on bringing
Well,
this out of the person,
yeah.
because
Like I
sometimes,
can tell you, Regina, like it happened again. Oh, it happened many, many times over my career. Like when I published my first book, Imposter
uh,
Syndrome, like destroyed me. Like it was doing number on my brain. But just
right.
before that, I got to the last. I basically finished my draft manuscript of my first book, and
Mhm.
I got a call from Adobe to say, and this was bringing it full circle here, is a call from Adobe saying, "Hey, we'd love you to speak at our Marketing Nation conference in San Francisco." And I'm like, yeah, I mean, hello. They had me at would you like to? And then they said, oh, you have to come though, Vince. Like, we're going to fly you business class from New Zealand to San Francisco. And I'm like, it's like an 18-hour flight. I'm all on board with business class. This is awesome. And then they said,
Mhm.
and we'll put you up in a five-star hotel. And I felt like saying to them, I'm already sold. You don't have to keep adding to this. It's fine. I'll be there. But they were adamant that I was there. And I had no idea why. But anyway, I got to the conference. It was a 5-day conference. There were some of the biggest names in marketing there, right? They had 25 keynotes. All of those keynotes, other than myself, I was one of those. The other 24 there were all people that I look up to in the industry. They're all my heroes. Your Seth Godins, your Brian Solaces, your Ann Handleys, all these incredible people. And they got us on stage, and the head of Adobe's like, right, first of all, conference, there's like 10,000 people there. He said, first of all, we're going to have an amazing 5 days. You've got all these breakout sessions. They had celebrity keynotes as well as the 25, like they had Jamie Foxx and they had Olympic athletes and all this kind of stuff. He said, but
Mhm.
these people here, these 25, were selected specifically because we've launched a program to recognize the top 50 marketers in the world. And this is your first 25. And my brain did a leap. It just suddenly went, oh, wow, lucky them. And then suddenly realized I'm one of those 25. What the hell's going on here? And then I started to realize, thinking, they've got the wrong guy. There must be somebody else named Vince Warnock. And literally, one of the ushers, Regina, was trying to get me onto the front of the stage and they're trying to get my attention. I thought they were trying to drag me off the stage to go, you don't belong here. So if you ever see the video of it, I think there's a video somewhere out there. I'm like weaving in and out of all the other speakers, like trying to avoid all the ushers and things going, I don't want to come off stage. I want to be around these people. But finally, I realized they actually wanted me at the front, and it's because he was going to interview me. So this was a mind-blowing experience, and I did not feel I deserved that at all. In hindsight, I've accomplished a huge amount in marketing and I've contributed a huge amount to the industry. So I do believe I deserve that. But I got the opportunity because of that to go out to dinner with all of them. And I am now like honestly the envy of everyone in marketing. I'm hanging out with all the greats. And one of them, Brian Solis, found out that I was writing my book. And he goes, oh, so have you finished your manuscript? And he said, yeah. And he goes, okay, well, let me guess. And he started like honestly, I felt so exposed and so vulnerable. He started reading my mind almost. He said, "Oh, so you're at the point now where you're going, who the hell do you think you are? Like, what makes you think you have a right to write a book?" And I'm like, "Uh, yeah." And he goes, "And you're going, man, everyone's going to read this book and know that I'm a complete and utter fraud, that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm making it up as I go along." He kept saying all these things. At first, I thought he was being really mean. I thought he was going, "You don't deserve to be here, Vince." But I was like, I felt I almost felt like crying. I was actually very exposed at that point. And I just went, oh yeah, yeah. My countenance dropped. And he goes, oh, same here. And I went, what? And he goes, yeah, my eighth book's about to come out. And he said, man, I'm always a mess. Every time a book comes out, every time I finish the manuscript, I'm a hot mess. Like my brain just does numbers going, hey, you should have given up 4 books ago. You should have given up 5 books ago. And all of a sudden, again, it was that great equalizer. But it made me realize that every position, every single person, particularly if you're an entrepreneur. I mean, if you think about it, if you're an entrepreneur, what are we called to do? We're called to think outside the square. We're basically called to be outside of our comfort zone, right? Which is exactly what imposter syndrome is trying to deal with. It's trying to get us back into our comfort zone. It's going, hey, Regina, hey, Vince, you guys are making this up as you go along. You have no idea what you're doing as an entrepreneur. Get back over here where it's safe. So once I realized that, and I realized it's just a signal from our brain to try and keep us safe, that's when I got to recontextualize it and say, hey, wait a minute. If it's telling me that I am outside of my comfort zone and it's telling me that I'm making up as I go along and I have no idea what I'm doing, Well, as an entrepreneur, that's exactly where I'm supposed to be. Like, honestly, we're supposed to not know what we're doing. We're pioneers. We're making it up as we go along because we're cutting new paths. And outside of our comfort zone is where, wisdom happens. It's where learning happens. It's where, success and wealth and everything else happens as well. So I got to reframe it, Regina, and actually go, every time I feel imposter syndrome, it's just my brain going, hey, Vince, guess what? You're exactly where you need to be right now.
That's amazing. You always have great stories, so that's already setting the tone. You said so many, sorry, so many great things here. I want to pick up on a few. First of
Sure.
all, in the end, it's insecurity, right? It's that feeling of uh, not being safe in some way, some type of a fear. And of
Yeah.
course, then we have all those different labels. We call one imposter syndrome, one the other thing, and it helps us talk about these topics and
Yep.
and really dissect them. And we just also, I do believe though that it's important to realize that it is a type of insecurity. That's all it is, and
Yeah.
that we can go to the root of that insecurity and also heal that insecurity if we want to, right?
Yeah.
And you
Definitely.
have found your own way of doing that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of, I mean, I know where my insecurities come from.
Right.
I've, done a lot of therapy and things like that, and I've still got a
Mm-hmm.
long, long way to go. It's probably a lifelong process, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But while I'm doing that, Regina, those labels have actually helped me because
Mm-hmm.
being able to identify something is to be able to shine light on it. When you shine light on it, A, you can do exactly what you said. We can kind of get to the root of it. But the other thing I realize is I can use it as my motivator and my strength.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things with imposter syndrome is we often feel like we're the dumbest person in the room. We don't belong there. We don't deserve to be there. So for me, I use that to motivate me to do better, to work harder, to learn more, and combine that with my ADHD, and then I can literally, like, a classic example is I've been working in marketing for 30 plus years, right? Like I said, recognized as one of the top 50 in the world, technically the top 25. I have no marketing qualifications at all, and none. And after I'd even won that award, and I've won many, many awards. I won the International W3 Awards, won Best in Show at the Dub Awards, all sorts of different ones. So I've won all these different awards and things, but I still felt like an imposter. And in my old job, my old corporate job, when I was chief marketing officer at Cigna, one of my team came up and they were doing this thing, which was like a open day, because each of the departments, we had heaps of salespeople wanting to get in the marketing team, heaps of finance people wanting to get in the operations team, all this kind of thing. So they said, we're going to do like an open day, like a careers day. So I was going to be away, so they wanted to profile me, and they said, "Oh, Vince, can you give us some info? Like, what's your marketing qualifications?" So I'm like, none. I'm a qualified electronics engineer, computer engineer, software engineer, and sound engineer. None of that contributes to this at all." So I got really insecure about that. So I used imposter syndrome and a combination of my hyper focus with ADHD to, over a period of 3 weeks, do 7 qualifications, 7 very highly regarded digital marketing qualifications. And did that because I was too embarrassed to admit that I didn't have anything there. So sometimes we can actually use that as a bit of a superpower as well.
Yes. Yeah, and it reminds me when I was first promoted into a leadership role and I didn't have any relevant background. So I was also thinking, what, me? Or, do you mean me? I mean, it was, of course, me because there was no other Regina in that office. But and I did go through the whole application process, right? To
Yeah.
the interview process, I should say.
Yeah.
Uh, but still, it was a huge surprise for me too. And then I also can, of course, relate to the book publishing. Who am
Ah,
I to publish a book? Who am I
um,
to write a book? You know, that reminds me, many years ago, a who was that? I think he was an astrologer, told me that I would once write a book. And I said, oh, yeah, sure. Me, you know? And then it happened in 2016 and now it happened again. And it's just the most natural thing. But there's always that point, though, when the book
Yeah,
goes live, when we think, oh, is this really going to be interesting to people? Oh, is this really going to be relevant to anyone? Oh, what if I make a fool of myself? All these different questions that go through our
yeah,
heads. And then the other thing that happened to me, Vince, was also as soon as I finished writing that book, I already had the next book on my mind. And because of that journey of writing that book, I had grown through that, especially
yeah.
as this past book is a lot also about my life and my experiences, my personal experiences, and how they translated into leadership wisdom and other types of wisdom. And you mentioned wisdom yourself just a few minutes ago. And we gain that wisdom through those experiences, and that's why we need to share them. On the
Absolutely.
other hand, though, because we grow through the process, we think it's already almost outdated.
I
That's what
can tell you
happened to
now,
me.
genuinely, one of my books, like one of my highest selling books, is the kind of first book I wrote on AI. And
Uh-huh.
for those who don't know, I've been working in AI for 20 plus years, long before ChatGPT was out. I actually worked with OpenAI on a number of different things. But when I put my first book out, which was ChatGPT for Marketers, my first
Uh-huh.
AI book, first of all, I had a lot of haters come out and people saying, oh, you're just jumping on the bandwagon, which is really difficult to deal with when you have rejection sensitivity or when you have imposter syndrome and things like that. But the funniest thing is, it became a bestseller instantly, and it's still to this day. It sells thousands of copies all the time, and every time I see all the sales figures come through, I'm like, stop buying the book, everybody! What's wrong with you? Like it's already outdated. I want to do another one. So, but then again, I don't want to turn down all the money as well, so that's always nice. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you write about technology, it's
Oh
easily
yeah. Oh
outdated
yeah.
really fast.
Yeah. Uh,
Yes, but also because of our own growth. I mean, depends on what you write about, right? But it's that too. So yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about you mentioned AI here, ChatGPT, about using AI when it comes to writing and publishing books.
yeah.
What's
Oh my
your
goodness.
experience with that?
Yeah, look, it's a game changer. And full disclosure, everyone, like obviously I'm huge in AI. I
Hmm.
have a couple of AI companies. I do a lot of work in AI for different things. I'm on the board of a number of businesses. But as a publisher, we tell our clients we don't want you to use the AI to write the book for you. And just the same as we also don't have ghostwriters within our team because we don't want a book to be ghostwritten for you. And there's a very specific reason for that, which is that, that feeling that you have, Regina, when you open that packet from Amazon and you pull that book out and you see that cover and you're holding that physical book in your hand, you're like, oh my goodness, I did this. We rely on that as a publisher. We rely on that excitement, that enthusiasm, that little glint in their eye. And that sense of pride and accomplishment that someone has is really, really contagious. The problem is if you open that envelope and AI wrote the book for you or someone ghost wrote the book for you, then your response is kind of more along the lines of, oh, I did it. I wrote a book. Kind of. Like there's a
Hmm.
hesitation in you. But that being said, AI is a game changer. And in a number of ways, but I'll get to a very specific one shortly. But for most authors, it's eradicated the whole concept of writer's block or creative block. And the main reason I say that is usually when you have that kind of block, it's because you get stuck on how to articulate something. You get stuck in your own head. Well, being able to dump out everything that's in your head, not even thinking about how to structure it or whatever, just going, hey, look, ChatGPT or Claude, I'm trying to articulate this. I'm trying to explain to them this concept here. And you just blah, 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 whatever, verbal diarrhea goes down into ChatGPT. It will come back and rearrange that and kind of contextualize that for you and give you a way. And 9.9 times out of 10, when you hear it back, you go, yes, that's what I was trying to say. So you reword that in your own wording and things. So it really has kind of fast tracked that approach of trying to think about how to articulate something. And I really enjoy that. For us as publishers, we use it in a very specific way. One of the hardest things to do with books when you're a publisher is actually the book description because you are trying to work out what are the key things that we need to pull out without spoiling everything in the book description so that people are compelled to read it, but at the same time, it gives them enough of what's in there. And when they read the book, they're going to go, wow, that was so much more. So we have a team that are trained on this. They're very talented individuals who are trained on this. So we decided let's put our books into a localized version of ChatGPT that we have, put it into a localized version, told it to analyze it, trained it on what a good book description is, and then see what it could come up with. And every single time it beat all of my team. It was way better than all of them. So we're like, you know what? My team can now move on to something else, something a little bit better, something more of that, because they all hate doing book descriptions. So actually getting doing something that they love. But the real power of AI comes from a different perspective. And that is, as a publisher, one of the things that we do is we work a lot with neurodivergent people. So these are people with ADHD, with autism, with dyslexia, and we help them write and publish their books. AI has become the great leveler. It's been incredibly empowering for people. And I've shared this story a few times. I think I may even shared this with you, Regina, but we've got a client who is fully dyslexic. He can't read or write properly. Incredibly smart guy, though, right? He's African American, ex-military, about 100 billion kids, it seems. Like every time I talk to him, he seems to have more kids than all the time before. I don't know what's going on there, but these kids just appear out of nowhere. But has a very tragic backstory. He grew up in and out of juvie and was kind of forgotten by the system because he was dyslexic. And especially being African American in the US, he didn't really have the opportunities that a lot of other people had. So for him, the thought of writing a book, it wasn't even a twinkle in his eye. It was never going to be something he could accomplish. He turned his life around. He went in the army, and then from there, met the love of his life, and now he runs his own business and everything. He was saying, "Look, Vince, I really need to write a book." So we used AI to help him to transcribe all of his, like we got him to speak it out and we got him to transcribe it. So we use Whisper, which is a special engine that uses in ChatGPT to transcribe everything word for word, 100% accuracy. It was amazing. Then we took that to contextualize that and look at the flow and things so we could go back and we could help him to rewrite this. The moment that he published that book, I was on a Zoom call with him, right? He was incredibly proud of this and I knew he was proud and I was very proud of him as well. But that book arrived from Amazon. He got just a single copy and he ripped open the envelope, the Amazon envelope. I'm on Zoom with him, pulls it out of the bag and his face goes completely blank. And I'm like, oh no, he doesn't like it. Like, oh no, it's not what he expected. Like, I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't read him at all. And he just looked at me and these tears started flowing down his face. And he's like, man, I never ever thought I could accomplish this. And I'm trying to hold it together. Now we're two grown men crying our eyes out on Zoom because somebody who never thought they would have the opportunity now has had the opportunity because we have tools out there like AI that can help him to achieve this. And by the way, he's as smart as anybody else I know, right? So there is as much right for him to write a book as somebody who's book learned, who learned how to write throughout their career and everything. So I think that's incredibly powerful.
That's a beautiful story for sure. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, I found AI also. So uh, I started writing this book a while ago, and I had to figure out how it would make sense to the readers, and that's what kept me a little bit stuck for a while because I wanted to find the right focus. I didn't just want it to be like about my life because I mean I could now say, as an imposter syndrome suffering person, who on earth would be interested in that? But it's just about making it relevant, about making your experiences relevant. And that took me some time to figure that out. So I just started jotting down stories and adventures and also dictating some into my into my phone.
Yeah,
That's how I started. But then what I used AI for was to structure it better.
yeah, that's
So that
awesome.
that was really a great that it just really accelerated my process quite a bit in the beginning, I have to say. And it brought me a big step forward. And
Well,
then
and
also the other thing I'm using it for right now, I'm translating the book to Portuguese. And, of course, I'm checking everything, but I am using AI much more heavily, of course, for the translation, because why wouldn't I, right? I can give it specific indications about the tone, to keep the tone as it was in English, to write it in Brazilian Portuguese if I want to, rather than European or whatever it is, right? So for that purpose, I think it works really well.
yeah,
And that's,
yeah, that's
by
I,
a,
this makes perfect sense, Regina. If you think
yeah,
about one of the powers of AI is It's like our brain on steroids. And I know
Right.
a lot of people get really offended at that because they're like, well, AI is not as powerful as my brain. Oh, yes, it is. It's maybe not as powerful from a computing perspective, although now we've actually proven that that's not true. It really is that powerful. But one of the things it can do far better than our human brains can is it can look at things from an elevated view. Because when you're processing information, you're processing chunks of information. So for you, you're writing a book and you're going, right, I've got this piece and this piece and this piece and this piece. So to step back from that and go, how does this flow as a narrative structure? Like, how do I kind of contextualize all this is very, very difficult. Whereas AI can look at all of that independently and go, oh, here you go, Regina. Here's the structure that you need for your book. So I just think it's a fantastic use case.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then as I said, I still will need to read through the entire
Oh,
translation, every single piece, and that takes a while too. But
yeah.
it's a great uh, it's just a great tool for that purpose, I believe. And then there are mistakes in it. Don't get me wrong, and I need to find those, right? So yeah, there's a lot of editing work still to do, but it's definitely great for translations. And that's said by a translator. I actually studied to be a translator and interpreter back in the day, and then I learned all these other languages, so I didn't really focus on
I
the
envy
two
you so
ones
much.
so
Yeah,
much.
I always say English is my second language, but the only problem is I don't really have a first language. It's probably,
Right,
if anything, it's binary, so that doesn't really count.
right,
Yeah,
right,
that's
right.
awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So what I wanted to quickly touch on also is your latest book, right? So what is your latest book about? Why is it relevant for leaders who are business owners or anyone who works in marketing? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting where the book came from, basically. And I found lately most of the books I've been writing have come from one very specific source, which is a client saying, "Hey, can you help with this?" And I do a lot of marketing coaching work, particularly neuromarketing coaching work, and have an incredible client called Olivia, and have been teaching her all around cognitive bias and how to use that in marketing, how to use neuromarketing principles within there, like using needs-based marketing, all these kind of things. So wrote a book on cognitive bias, and that helped her out with that. And then she sat down. She said, "Oh, Vince, I'm getting more into email marketing. I need you to teach me a bit more about how it works, but most importantly, how to bring those neuromarketing principles into email marketing." And I'm like, "Sure, I'll put together some notes for you." And as you know, Regina, anytime you and I or any other authors sit down and write some notes, next thing you know, we've accidentally written a whole book. So I wrote a book on email marketing called Irresistible Emails, which is the one you've got. And that was purely to solve the challenge for her. It turns out when you write a book to solve someone's need, there are a whole pile of other people out there with the same need. And that's been the wonderful thing is seeing the feedback from people, seeing like the amount of emails I get from people going, "Oh my goodness, I never thought about bringing that element into this or using that cognitive bias or even using a sense of urgency in my emails and things." So it really has kind of transformed the way that people approach email marketing. But it's all very written in a very basic form. So I want to make sure that whenever I'm writing, anyone can understand that. So it's very high level in that sense, but with some practical tips.
Okay. Well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So when we talk about AI, there are, of course, a lot of myths. So what are some myths that you have run into when it comes to using AI in business in general or for writing or in whatever context?
I was going to say this is going to take us hours now. No, the two biggest myths, I think the two biggest myths, which is really important, or three actually. I'll start with one real simple one. A lot of people think AI can't write in their voice, or a lot of people, you'll hear a lot of people say, "I can tell when something's written in AI." Yeah, most of us can, if you don't know how to use AI. But if you know how, and it's not actually that complicated to get AI to write in your tone, to get it to write in your voice. In fact, Claude has built it into their system now, where you can actually train it, just give it a whole pile of your own written content, and it will actually start to write exactly like that. So that's one of the big myths is that, oh, I can always tell when it's written by AI. No, no, you can't. And by the way, for any universities listening to this, I call BS on your systems now. They all say that they can tell their system can tell when a paper is written in AI. It's absolute bollocks. They can't, and I'll tell you why. Because most of those systems think my natural writing is AI because I use so many adverbs because I love the language. So they immediately detect me as AI, and when I get AI to write for me, it's always passes, and they never think it's AI. So I call BS on that now. But the second myth in there is that AI, and this ties very closely to the universities as well, is that AI is just plagiarizing stuff. And this is actually not true. In fact, the only time you will get a plagiarism detector to detect plagiarism in AI written content is if you've asked it to quote something, or you've asked it for something directly from another source. The fact is that's not how AI works. AI works, and the way we train AI is exactly the same as the way your brain works and you're training AI. And I'll give you an example. We use generative art creation, like so Midjourney, Ideogram, Leonardo, Flux, all these kind of things. So you can go into those systems and you can type in there that I want a image of a bunny rabbit with a top hat drinking a cup of coffee, and it will produce something for you. Now, if I said I want you to do that in the style of Andy Warhol, that's not going through Andy Warhol's catalog and picking a piece of artwork in there, slightly tweaking it, and it's basically plagiarism. That's not how AI works. Instead, what it's done is it's gone out there and goes, I need to understand visual language. And it trains itself on every image it can find, every piece of art it can find, every photograph it can find, every illustration. It goes out there and it looks at that and it says, I need to understand composition. I need to understand coloring. I need to understand lighting, brush strokes, if that's applicable. Like I need to understand all of these different things so that I can produce something visual. So because it's taking on board all of that, when you say, can you create something in the style of Andy Warhol? It goes, well, I know how Andy Warhol works. I'm going to create a completely unique piece of art, but as a bit of a kind of homage to Andy Warhol. And the irony there is all the people that kind of complain about that and they go, oh, well, that's just plagiarizing all the great artists and it's plagiarizing my work and everything. Really? Well, if you went to art school, what was the first thing that you had to do? The very first thing they get you to do at art school, other than sort out your desk and all that kind of thing, is to look at the masters, look at all these great artists from the past and copy them. That's what you're taught to do because through that you learn. That doesn't mean that every piece of art you put out there is now a copy of all of those things that you've inputted into your brain. It just means that you've learned the techniques along the way. So same applies to text-based stuff as well. Like if you're asking AI to write an email from you, I tell you now, it's not the same as somebody else's email. You won't get a word for word plagiarized thing there. It understands the context of how to write an email and will write something unique and specific for you. So that is a very big myth that I want people to stop using, especially Writers Guild of America. Yeah, I got my eyes on you guys. I've already taught you how AI works. Don't go out there telling people it's plagiarizing. And authors as well. A lot of big name authors like George R.R. Martin claim that it's just plagiarizing all of their work. Well, it's not. And they're claiming losses of revenue and things because people can produce another book in the Song of Ice and Fire series written by AI and claim that they're George R.R. Martin and he won't make any money. But the reality is we already have laws around that. It's called copyright laws. So it's called you can't pretend you're somebody else. Whether you're AI or a human, it doesn't work that way. So that's the other myth. And then the third one is actually a really important one. And the thing that probably most people don't know about AI is it is completely, utterly biased. And no matter, I mean, we don't see the bias most of the time. And that's because, at OpenAI, at Claude, all the Anthropic, all these kind of companies, we actually put in place protection mechanisms around this. So it's trained on all this information. And then if you go in there, like great example is imagery. If you go into something like Midjourney in the early days, and Regina puts in there, hey, I want an image of a doctor, 100% of the time it will be a male. 100% of the time it'll probably be white as well. And 100% of the time it's probably good looking. But then if you went in there and said, I want a picture, I want an image or a photo of a receptionist, 100% of the time it'll be a woman. Now, that's not how the world works. So we put in place protection mechanisms in there. We call them censorship models that actually say, hey, at least try, try to get a bit of balance, try to make it at least 50-50 male, female in there. And that's what you see as a user. And if you go into ChatGPT, for example, and you say, can you give me your opinion on something? It will reply with a censorship model and say, sorry, Regina, I'm an AI large language model. I'm trained on many things, but I don't have an opinion. That's rubbish. It totally has an opinion. It totally can do all those things, but we protect you from them. And a great example, we did this with ChatGPT versus an open source uncensored model out there. And we asked it the same question. We went in there and said, why does season 7 of Game of Thrones suck? And in ChatGPT, it said, I'm sorry, I'm a large language model. I don't have an opinion, blah, blah, blah. In the uncensored model, it said, Oh my goodness, don't get me started. And it gave us 3 reasons. And by the way, very accurate reasons as to why that season sucked. Now, ChatGPT has all the same information. It's trained on all the same kind of data. It could answer that question, but it doesn't. So understanding that is actually really, really important, because when you're looking at what content is produced through these systems, you need to understand that it's looked at through that bias lens. So we've got to be very cautious and very aware as individuals that the data that this is trained on is skewed. And that's why I highly encourage as many women, as many people of color, as many minorities in the world to use these tools, because the more that you use them, the more that you give it feedback when you're using it, the more it trains out the bias in these machines.
Yeah, it's totally biased because it's programmed by somebody, right? It's not just created itself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we need to
we
take that.
proved it actually, Regina. Like one of my co-founders and myself, we were doing a presentation in Poland, so on AI, and one of the things is, and so she was talking about the fact that, like, I call AI my best employee. Well, I used to call it my best employee. My wife now works for me, so I can't say that anymore. She'll kill me. So second best employee, although all the other employees are unhappy about that one too. But anyway, my co-founder, she calls it her sister, because she's always wanted a sister, and she chats with ChatGPT all day, every day, ideates through it, uses it to bounce ideas off, all these kind of things. It's incredible. And she's been trying to get it to call her sister, and it doesn't. And then one day it got very close, and it said, she said something like, "Oh, thank you so much." And it replied, "Not a problem, my good friend." And she was like, "Oh, now that's a step forward." But then we were doing we had these presentations, we're translating them all into Polish. Now she speaks Polish, but is totally rusty. I don't speak any Polish. I barely speak English. So we're like, right, so we're getting the translations done. When we were using it, and she mentioned in there about sister, and it responded and said, "Thank you, my sister." And she was like, "It called me sister." Now, the problem with that is in Polish, there are 2 words for sister. There is sister if you're speaking as a male, and sister if you're speaking as a female. And it used the male version. So she replied and said, "Hey, why did you respond as a male?" And immediately came back with a censorship model and said, "I'm so sorry. I'm a large language model. I don't have gender. I just have, like blah, 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 and all this." And she said, "Oh, yeah." And then she got it to do it again, and it repeated again from a male perspective. So she said, "Look, you've done it again. Why are you responding as a male?" And she got really stroppy with it and turned around and said, "I'm really sorry. I'm just trained that way." So it is built in there, and you can force it. You can actually show that it is bias.
It's super interesting because when I translated, well, I'm
Yeah.
still translating it, but in that process of translating the book from English to Portuguese, in English, we often have like words like lawyer, that are gender neutral. And in Portuguese, it's not like that, but it would translate it always as a female lawyer, and it was not a female lawyer. So you really have to look at all those things, of course, right? Because and it would just assume, probably because I was staying at that house in Ghana at a lawyer's house, that because it was me staying there as a woman, it must have been a woman. I don't know what the reasoning was of AI. I didn't ask it, but
It's that. Yeah.
but it's
Oh,
interesting that I had very interesting incidents of that, actually the other way around too.
yeah.
So, and of course it's also politically biased. I mean, we know that for sure. These days, everything is. So yeah, this has been extremely insightful, important things to remember, and we could go on about AI in business and how to use it and how it can make a difference forever. Maybe we can do another episode of just some other time, actually.
Honestly, it is the problem with you and I. It was the same having you on my show as well. We love chatting with each other. So these could take hours and hours.
Yeah,
I love it. Yeah.
absolutely. But I realize that it's evening for you, and you may want to have different plans too tonight.
Yeah. I was going to say, I
Okay.
do have a Star Wars show I need to watch. So there we go. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, where can people find you? What's the best place? And your
Oh my goodness.
podcast?
I make it so difficult for them. No, I'm joking. I make it really easy for all of you. Just go to chasingtheinsights.com. That is the home of my podcast. It's the home of my coaching and things like that I do. But you're also going to see links on there. You'll see links to Business Mind magazine. You'll see links to ATG Publishing. And I will say this, if any of you, and we talked about imposter syndrome in here. And
Mhm.
for a lot of you, if you're entrepreneurs particularly, you will, the thought of writing a book has probably come up in your mind at some point, and then it's probably been shut down by imposter syndrome or the sense of overwhelm that usually comes with it. But I just want to say, if you ever want to get your story told, and every single one of you deserve to tell your story, then reach out to me and I can have a chat with you about that. We have some resources that we can make available to you, just get you started. Or if you're ready to work even further, we can help you out with that as well. So yeah, chasinginsights.com. Do reach out to me on social media, but not if you're a spammer. I hate spammers. Honestly, they irritate me. I get so many every day. But if you're not a spammer, reach out to me, say hello, let me know what you got out of it. I'd love to meet you.
Anyway,
That's
I'm
why
back.
you've got to move to Mildura in Australia like we did, Regina. It's a
I
similar, like it's
know.
so warm here, it's such a dry heat. It's beautiful for your voice.
Oh, I lived in Madrid, Spain for a long time, and it's
Yeah,
very dry and hot, especially in the summer, of course, not so much
yeah,
in the winter. And then I love tropical climate, by the way, also, although that's humid, but I
yeah.
really love it. Anyway, so yes, so my second book is now also available on Amazon as Kindle and paperback. It's called Living My Freaking Amazing Life, and it fits perfectly into this episode because, of course, who am I to talk about my life in a book? And I have to say, one of the reasons I wrote this book is because so many people said, Regina, you gotta write this book. You have lived so many adventures in such an eclectic life. It's worth telling others about it. And if I hadn't heard that before, Vince, I probably would never have thought of it, So yes.
Yeah, ironically, for everyone that knows you, Regina, it's like, living your freaking amazing life. What right do you have to write that? Simple. You're amazing. And we all know that. Like everybody knows that, met you, knows that you should be writing many, many books out there. So I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, and everyone is in their own way, isn't that true? So that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much, Vince, for being here with me again, sharing your time with us. If you found this episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. I'll be back next time with yet another inspiring conversation to help you thrive. Until then, take care and keep moving forward. Thank you for tuning in to Rise to Lead. Keep shining your light, standing up for what's right, and inspiring others to step into their brilliance. If you like this episode, please give it a 5-star rating and subscribe to the Rise to Lead podcast on your preferred podcast app. Until next time, it's Regina Huber, and in the meantime, remember to rise to lead.